The apartment was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the windows. She stood in front of him trembling slightly, holding her phone tightly in her hand. And for the first time in months, she looked scared. Not angry. Not defensive. Scared. "I deleted him," she whispered. Her voice cracked as she slowly turned the phone screen toward him. The contact was gone. The messages were gone. Everything. The same friend they had argued about for almost a year had suddenly disappeared with one tap. A few months ago, this moment would have meant everything to him. Back then, he would have felt relieved. Hopeful. Like maybe she was finally choosing their relationship. But tonight, he felt nothing. And that terrified her even more. "Say something," she whispered nervously. He stared at the phone for a few quiet seconds before looking away. Then softly replied, "It's too late." Her breathing instantly became uneven. "What do you mean too late?" she asked quickly. "I'm fixing it." That sentence nearly made him smile sadly. Because that was the problem. She thought the relationship started breaking tonight. She still didn't understand. It started breaking long before this moment. Months earlier, he used to fight for her attention constantly. Whenever she stayed up late texting that guy. Whenever she smiled at messages she hid from him. Whenever she defended another man harder than she defended his feelings. He spoke up. Not perfectly. Not calmly every time. But honestly. Because he loved her enough to fear losing her emotionally. And every single time, she made him feel guilty for caring. He's just a friend. You're overthinking. You're being insecure again. Eventually, those words started destroying him quietly from the inside. "You know what hurts most?" he asked softly. Tears already filled her eyes. "What?" He looked at her calmly. "I started questioning myself because of how badly you defended him." The room fell silent instantly. Because deep down, she knew it was true. Every time he expressed pain, she treated it like weakness instead of trying to understand it. And now the damage had finally reached him emotionally. "I didn't cheat on you," she whispered desperately. "I know," he replied quietly. That answer confused her immediately. Because there was no anger in his voice anymore. Only exhaustion. Pure emotional exhaustion. "Then why are you acting like this?" she cried. This time, he finally looked directly into her eyes. And what she saw there terrified her. Not jealousy. Not rage. Detachment. "I left emotionally long before tonight," he admitted softly. Her face lost color instantly. Because suddenly, she realized deleting the contact wasn't enough anymore. Not after months of emotional distance. Not after months of making him feel replaceable. Tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably now. "I'm trying to choose you," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "I know." "Then why does it still feel like I'm losing you?" For several seconds, he stayed silent. Then finally, he gave the answer that shattered her completely. "Because you waited until I stopped fighting for us to finally take my pain seriously." The rain outside grew heavier. But somehow, the silence between them felt even colder. The rain continued falling outside while silence filled the apartment. Neither of them moved. Neither of them knew how to fix what had already been damaged for too long. She still stood there holding her phone tightly, as if deleting that contact should have changed everything instantly. But deep down, she was beginning to realize something painful. The problem was never just the other man. It was what his presence slowly did to their relationship. "You really stopped loving me?" she asked weakly. The question sounded fragile. Like someone already afraid of the answer. He leaned back against the kitchen counter quietly before replying. "No." That single word gave her a tiny moment of hope. Until he softly added, "But loving you started hurting more than comforting me." Her chest tightened immediately. Because that sentence carried something far more dangerous than anger. Emotional exhaustion. Months ago, he used to notice every little change in her mood. Every delayed reply. Every hidden smile at her phone. Every moment she emotionally drifted away while insisting nothing was wrong. And every time he tried explaining how it made him feel, the conversation somehow became about his insecurity instead of her behavior. At first, he blamed himself. Maybe he really was overthinking. Maybe he was too emotional. Maybe loving someone deeply just made people paranoid. So eventually, he stopped speaking up. And that silence slowly destroyed the relationship more than arguments ever did. She slowly sat down on the couch, wiping tears from her face. "I didn't realize things got this bad," she whispered. He looked at her quietly. "That's because you only noticed the relationship once I stopped chasing you emotionally." The honesty in his voice made her cry harder. Because once again, he was right. There was a time when she secretly found comfort in how much he cared. The jealousy, the constant attention, the emotional reactions. Deep down, it reassured her that he loved her deeply. But she never imagined what would happen if that attention disappeared completely. Now she knew. And it terrified her. "I thought trust meant freedom," she whispered softly. "It does," he replied calmly. "But emotional respect matters too." The room fell silent again. Because for the first time, she truly understood the difference. He never wanted control over her life. He wanted reassurance that their relationship still mattered more than another man's attention. And instead of offering comfort, she protected the situation that kept hurting him. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked down at her phone again. The deleted contact suddenly felt meaningless now. Not because it wasn't important. Because she realized too much damage had already happened before that moment. "You really think I emotionally replaced you?" she whispered. His eyes lowered briefly before answering. "I think I slowly stopped feeling emotionally safe with you." That sentence hit harder than she expected. Because emotional safety isn't something people talk about enough. It's invisible, quiet, and once it disappears, love starts becoming exhausting instead of peaceful. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then suddenly, her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Both of them looked down instinctively. Her heartbeat immediately sped up. Without hesitation, she turned the phone completely off and placed it on the table. Then looked at him desperately. "I don't care about him anymore." He believed her. That was the tragic part. He genuinely believed her now. But belief alone couldn't instantly repair months of emotional damage. "You know what scares me," she whispered through tears. He stayed silent. "I finally understand your pain now." Her voice cracked. "After you already learned how to stop needing me emotionally." For the first time that night, his expression softened slightly. Not because things were fixed, but because for once, she finally understood what he had been trying to explain all along. Unfortunately, some realizations arrive only after the relationship has already started breaking apart. The apartment felt colder after that conversation. Not physically, emotionally. Like the warmth they once shared had quietly disappeared while neither of them noticed it happening. She sat curled up on the couch with swollen eyes while he stood near the kitchen window staring silently at the rain outside. The distance between them felt impossible to ignore now. And for the first time, she understood she might actually lose him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. That silence alone made her nervous. Finally, after several seconds, he spoke quietly. "I'm thinking about how long I kept convincing myself that your behavior wasn't hurting me." Her chest tightened instantly. Because deep down, she remembered every moment he tried communicating his pain. And every time, she minimized it. Not intentionally, but repeatedly. There were nights when he stayed awake wondering why she smiled more at another man's messages than his. Moments when he questioned whether he was becoming emotionally difficult to love. Times he practiced conversations in his head before bringing up concerns because he already expected her to call him insecure. And slowly, those moments changed him. Not into someone angry. Into someone emotionally tired. "I never wanted to make you feel unimportant," she whispered. He finally turned toward her. "But you did." No shouting. No cruelty. Just honesty. And honesty hurt the most. She lowered her eyes instantly. Because now she saw everything clearly. The late-night texting. The emotional energy she gave another man while her relationship quietly starved for reassurance. The defensive reactions every time he expressed discomfort. At the time, she thought she was protecting her independence. Now, she realized she had been protecting her ego instead of protecting the relationship. "I wish you told me all this earlier," she whispered weakly. A sad smile appeared briefly on his face. "I tried." That sentence shattered her again. Because he really had tried. Many times. But eventually, people stop repeating pain when they feel unheard long enough. Silence filled the room once more. Then, slowly, he walked toward the couch and sat across from her. Not close enough to touch. That distance alone made tears rise in her eyes again. "You know what finally changed something inside me?" he asked quietly. She looked at him carefully. "What?" He leaned back slightly, exhausted. "One day, I realized I was becoming anxious every time your phone lit up." Her heart dropped instantly. "And I hated who I was becoming." The vulnerability in his voice broke something inside her. Because she had never truly considered what constant emotional insecurity was doing to him mentally. "I started checking your mood based on another man's presence in your life," he continued softly. "I started feeling relieved whenever you ignored him for a few hours." He shook his head slowly. "That's not healthy love." Tears rolled down her face silently now. Because suddenly, she understood something important. He wasn't leaving because he stopped loving her. He was leaving because loving her started damaging his emotional peace. "I would have changed if I knew it was hurting you this badly," she whispered desperately. This time, he looked at her with genuine sadness. "That's the problem." Her breathing became uneven again. "You only started understanding after I emotionally checked out." The truth in those words felt unbearable. Because once again, he was right. For months, she assumed he would always stay. Always fight. Always care loudly enough for both of them. But now the man sitting in front of her looked completely different. Quieter. Emotionally detached. Like someone slowly learning how to survive disappointment. And that terrified her more than any argument ever had. Then, suddenly, he asked a question she wasn't prepared for. "Do you know why deleting his contact didn't fix anything for me tonight?" She shook her head slowly. His eyes met hers. "Because I needed emotional reassurance when I was still fighting for us." The room became painfully silent. "You gave it to me only after you felt me leaving." Her tears became uncontrollable instantly. Because deep down, she finally understood the damage completely now. Love isn't just about staying loyal physically. Sometimes people break emotionally long before betrayal ever happens. And once emotional exhaustion replaces emotional safety, even love itself starts struggling to survive. Outside, thunder echoed softly through the rain. But neither of them noticed anymore. Because the real storm had already been growing quietly between them for months. And now, for the first time, she was finally forced to face the painful possibility that maybe love alone wouldn't be enough to save them anymore. The night grew quieter after that. Neither of them argued anymore. And somehow, that silence felt more painful than every fight they had ever had combined. Because arguments at least meant emotions were still alive. But this felt like watching love slowly lose the strength to survive. She sat there wiping tears from her face while he leaned back against the couch, exhausted both physically and emotionally. For months, she believed the biggest problem in their relationship was his jealousy. Now she understood the truth. The real problem was how alone he had started feeling while still being beside her. "I never wanted another man to replace you," she whispered softly. He nodded slightly. "I know." That answer surprised her. Because she expected anger, accusations, bitterness. Instead, he sounded heartbreakingly calm. And that calmness scared her more every second. "Then why does it feel like I already lost you?" she asked emotionally. For several seconds, he stayed silent. Then quietly replied, "Because I spent too long feeling like I was competing for emotional space in my own relationship." Her chest tightened painfully. The honesty in his voice was impossible to escape now. She remembered every moment clearly. The time she immediately defended her friend, before even trying to understand why her boyfriend felt hurt. The way she rolled her eyes whenever he brought up boundaries. The moment she secretly enjoyed the attention because it made her feel wanted. At the time, none of it felt serious. Now, every memory felt heavy with regret. "I thought you were overreacting," she admitted softly. He gave a small tired smile. "That's because you only saw the situation from your side." The tears returned instantly. Because deep down, she knew he was right again. She focused so much on proving she wasn't cheating, that she completely ignored how emotionally unsafe the relationship had become for him. The apartment fell silent once more. Then, finally, he stood up slowly from the couch. "I'm tired," he said quietly. At first, she thought he meant physically, but the sadness in his voice made the truth obvious. He meant emotionally. As he walked toward the hallway, panic suddenly rose inside her chest. "Wait!" He stopped. She stood up quickly, her voice trembling. "Please don't walk away from me like this." For several seconds, he stayed still with his back facing her, then quietly asked, "How many times did I ask you not to emotionally walk away from me first?" The question shattered her instantly. Because she had no answer, he turned toward her slowly, and for the first time that night, she saw how deeply exhausted he truly looked. Dark circles beneath his eyes, tension in his face, the expression of someone who spent too long carrying emotional pain silently. "I kept trying to explain what I felt," he whispered. "But eventually, I started feeling stupid for caring so much." Tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably now, because nobody deserves to feel ashamed for asking to feel emotionally important in their own relationship. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. But this time, the words sounded smaller, weaker, because even she knew apologies couldn't instantly repair months of emotional damage. He looked at her quietly before speaking again. "You know what finally broke something inside me?" Her breathing slowed nervously. "What?" He swallowed hard before answering. "The night you laughed at me for asking if something felt inappropriate." Her face lost color immediately, because she remembered it perfectly. That night, he tried explaining how uncomfortable certain conversations made him feel. And instead of listening, she laughed softly and called him dramatic. At the time, she thought she was calming the situation. Now she realized what actually happened. She humiliated someone for expressing emotional vulnerability honestly. And after that moment, something inside him quietly started shutting down. "I didn't realize how badly that hurt you," she whispered brokenly. "That's the problem," he replied softly. "You never realized it." Silence swallowed the room again. Heavy, painful, final. Then suddenly, he walked toward the bedroom, and a terrifying thought entered her mind instantly. What if this relationship was already ending emotionally? What if she only started fighting for it after he mentally accepted losing it? The fear became unbearable. Without thinking, she followed him into the room. He opened the closet calmly and pulled out a small travel bag. Her heartbeat instantly stopped. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he quietly folded a few clothes and placed them inside. That silence alone nearly broke her. "Please," she whispered again, tears streaming down her face now. "Don't do this." Finally, he looked at her, and the sadness in his eyes hurt more than anger ever could. "I need space," he admitted quietly. Her knees felt weak instantly, because suddenly, the possibility of him actually leaving no longer felt like fear. It felt real. "You're seriously leaving me?" she cried. He closed the bag slowly before answering. "I think I already started leaving emotionally a long time ago." The room fell completely silent after that, because deep down, she knew exactly what he meant. People don't wake up one day emotionally detached. It happens slowly, after repeated disappointment, after feeling unheard for too long, after love becomes more emotionally exhausting than emotionally safe. And now, for the first time since they met, she realized she might not know how to bring him back anymore. The travel bag sat quietly on the bed between them. Small, simple, but somehow, it felt heavier than anything she had ever seen in her life. Because inside that bag wasn't just clothes. It was emotional distance, exhaustion, months of silent pain finally reaching its limit. She stared at him with trembling eyes while he calmly zipped the bag shut. That calmness terrified her now. Not long ago, he would have argued emotionally, raised his voice, tried desperately to make her understand. But the man standing in front of her tonight looked completely different. Quieter, detached, like someone who no longer expected to be emotionally chosen. "You really want to leave me alone right now?" she whispered weakly. He looked at her silently for a moment, then softly replied, "I've felt alone beside you for months." The words hit like a knife to her chest, because deep down, She finally understood the loneliness he had been carrying. The kind of loneliness that exists even while lying next to someone you love. Tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably now. "I didn't know you were hurting this badly," she whispered. A tired sadness crossed his face. "That's because every time I tried telling you, you defended yourself before trying to understand me." The room became painfully quiet again. Because once more, he was telling the truth. There were countless moments she could remember now. Moments she ignored because they seemed small at the time. The disappointment in his face whenever she prioritized another man's attention over reassuring him. The way his voice slowly became quieter during arguments. The nights he stopped trying to explain himself because he already expected to feel dismissed. And slowly, without realizing it, she taught him that expressing emotional pain only pushed her further away. So eventually, he stopped expressing it. "Can't we fix this together?" she asked desperately. He looked down briefly before answering. "I don't even know how to feel emotionally safe with you anymore." That sentence shattered something inside her. Because emotional safety is invisible until it disappears. And once it's gone, everything starts feeling unstable. He grabbed the bag quietly and walked toward the apartment door. Every step made panic rise higher inside her chest. "Please," she cried softly. He stopped near the entrance but didn't turn around immediately. Her voice broke completely. "I deleted him." Finally, he looked back at her, and the sadness in his eyes felt unbearable. "I know." "Then why does it still feel like this?" For several long seconds, silence filled the apartment. Then quietly, he gave the answer she would remember forever. "Because I needed reassurance when I was still begging for it." Her breathing became uneven instantly. "You gave it to me only after you felt me emotionally leaving." Tears blurred her vision completely now. Because for the first time, she fully understood the damage. He wasn't leaving because another man existed. He was leaving because he got tired of feeling emotionally secondary inside his own relationship. "I love you," she whispered desperately. He closed his eyes briefly after hearing those words. And when he spoke again, his voice sounded painfully exhausted. "I believe you do." That answer confused her instantly. "If you believe me, then why are you walking away?" He swallowed hard before replying. "Because love without emotional peace eventually becomes painful." The silence after that felt suffocating. Then finally, he opened the apartment door slowly, and the sound alone made her heart panic. Because suddenly, everything felt real. The possibility of waking up tomorrow without him. Without his messages. Without his attention. Without someone who once loved her loudly enough for both of them. She rushed toward him emotionally, grabbing his arm before he could step outside. "Please don't give up on us," she whispered through tears. For several seconds, he looked down at her hand holding him, then quietly said, "I'm not giving up." Her eyes filled with fragile hope instantly, until he softly added, "I'm trying to stop losing myself." The words destroyed her completely, because deep down, she finally realized what loving her had started costing him emotionally. His confidence, his peace, his emotional stability. And now, he was choosing to protect those things before the relationship destroyed them completely. Slowly, he removed her hand from his arm. Gentle, careful, like someone saying goodbye to something they once treasured deeply. Then he stepped outside, and the apartment suddenly felt unbearably empty. She stood frozen near the doorway long after he disappeared down the hallway. No anger. No dramatic final fight. Only silence. And somehow, that silence hurt more than screaming ever could. Because now she understood something terrifying. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's emotional exhaustion. And the man who once fought desperately to keep her had finally become too tired to fight anymore. The apartment didn't feel like home after he left. It felt unfamiliar. Cold. Too quiet. She stood near the doorway for several minutes staring at the empty hallway outside, hoping somehow he would come back. That maybe this was only temporary. Maybe he just needed air. Maybe he would text her in an hour like always. But deep down, something felt different this time. And that terrified her. Slowly, she walked back inside and closed the door. The silence surrounding her suddenly felt unbearable. No television noise. No soft conversations. No sound of him moving around the apartment. For the first time in years, she realized how much emotional warmth he quietly brought into her life every single day. And now it was gone. Her eyes landed on the couch where he used to sit waiting for her at night. Sometimes worried. Sometimes upset. But always emotionally present. And suddenly, a painful realization hit her. She spent so long focusing on how insecure he sounded, that she completely ignored how deeply he cared. Tears rolled down her face again as she sat down slowly. Her phone rested beside her silently now. No hidden conversations. No friend. No emotional distractions. And somehow, none of that mattered anymore, because the person she truly wanted attention from had finally stopped giving it. An hour passed. Then 2. Still no message from him. Normally, he always texted first after arguments, even the painful ones. But tonight, nothing. And that silence slowly started breaking her emotionally. Around midnight, she finally grabbed her phone and opened their old messages together. Thousands of conversations. Memes. Late-night talks. Voice notes. Tiny moments filled with love she once thought would always stay. But now, every message felt painful, because she could literally see the moment his energy started changing. At first, he wrote paragraphs. Long emotional explanations. Questions. Effort. Then slowly, the messages became shorter, colder, less emotional, like someone quietly giving up hope little by little. And somehow, she never noticed while it was happening. Her breathing became shaky again, because now she understood something devastating. People rarely leave suddenly. Usually, they leave emotionally in pieces long before they physically walk away. Her phone suddenly lit up. Her heart jumped instantly. His name. She answered immediately. Hello. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then finally, his tired voice came through softly. I just wanted to make sure you locked the door. Tears instantly filled her eyes again. Even after everything, he still cared about her safety. And somehow that kindness hurt more than anger ever could. Where are you? She whispered emotionally. At my brother's place. Silence again. Then finally, she asked the question haunting her since he left. Do you still love me? The quiet on the other end nearly broke her. Finally, he answered honestly. Yes. Relief flooded her chest for half a second, until he softly added, but I don't know if love feels healthy for me anymore. Her heart shattered all over again, because once more, he wasn't saying he stopped loving her. He was saying loving her started destroying his emotional peace. I'll change, she whispered desperately. This time, his voice sounded sadder than before. I know you want to. Then come home. Another silence. Longer this time. Painfully longer. Then finally, he whispered the words that terrified her most. I'm scared that if I come back too soon, nothing inside us will actually change. The call ended shortly after that. And for the first time, she truly understood what it feels like to lose someone slowly while they're still alive, still loving you, but no longer emotionally safe beside you. The call ended, but his words stayed trapped inside her mind. I'm scared that if I come back too soon, nothing inside us will actually change. She sat alone in the dark apartment staring at her phone while silence wrapped around her like a punishment. For the first time in their relationship, she had no excuses left. No defensiveness. No way to convince herself he was simply overreacting. Because now she finally saw the truth clearly. He wasn't emotionally leaving because he wanted freedom. He was leaving because he no longer felt emotionally safe staying. The next morning felt empty. No good morning text. No sound of him making coffee in the kitchen. No playful argument over music while getting ready for work. Only silence. Cold silence. And suddenly, she realized how much of her happiness quietly depended on his emotional presence. At work, she could barely focus. Every little thing reminded her of him. A song in the elevator. A couple laughing in the hallway. Even seeing someone hold hands outside the office made her chest tighten painfully. Because deep down, she knew she had taken something precious for granted. Someone who genuinely loved her deeply. Around lunchtime, her best friend finally confronted her. You look terrible, she said carefully. That almost made her laugh bitterly, because terrible was exactly how she felt. He left, she whispered softly. Her friend's expression changed instantly. What happened? For several seconds, she stayed quiet. Then finally, for the first time out loud, she admitted the truth. I made him feel emotionally replaceable. The words hurt to say, because once spoken aloud, they became real. Her friend looked stunned. Did you cheat? No. Then why would he leave? She lowered her eyes slowly. Because I kept protecting another man's place in my life while ignoring how much it hurt him. Silence followed immediately. And somehow, hearing herself explain, it made the guilt even heavier. Later that evening, she returned home emotionally exhausted. The apartment still felt lifeless without him. His hoodie remained hanging near the hallway. His favorite mug still sat beside the sink. Tiny reminders everywhere. Evidence that someone once loved her enough to build a life around her. And now, that life felt like it was slowly disappearing. She walked into the bedroom and froze. His side of the bed remained untouched. Cold. Empty. And suddenly, a memory hit her painfully hard. One night months ago, he quietly asked her, "Do you even notice when I'm hurting anymore?" At the time, she became defensive immediately. Now, she wished desperately she could go back and answer differently. Because that question wasn't about jealousy. It was about emotional loneliness. Tears filled her eyes again as she sat on the edge of the bed. Then, suddenly, her phone buzzed beside her. An unknown number. Her heart instantly knew who it was. The friend. For several seconds, she just stared at the screen silently. Months ago, she would have answered without hesitation. Now, the notification itself made her feel sick. Not because he had done something terrible, but because she finally understood what his presence represented inside her relationship. Distance, confusion, emotional instability. Without replying, she blocked the number completely, then slowly placed the phone down beside her. And for the first time, she didn't do it to prove anything to her boyfriend. She did it because she finally understood the damage herself. Unfortunately, understanding something too late doesn't guarantee you'll get another chance to fix it. That night, while lying alone in the silence he left behind, one terrifying realization finally became impossible to ignore. The man who once begged for reassurance had now become the one she was terrified of losing forever. Three days passed without seeing him. 3 painfully quiet days. Their conversations became limited to short texts. Simple things. Did you eat? Hope work went okay. Drive safe. Polite. Careful. Emotionally distant. And every cold reply made her chest ache more, because she remembered the version of him who used to send long emotional paragraphs whenever something felt wrong between them. Now, he barely spoke at all. On the 4th day, she finally texted him first. "Can we talk in person?" Several minutes passed before he replied. "Okay." That single word somehow made her nervous. Not relieved, because there was no warmth inside it anymore. That evening, they met at a small cafe near the river. The same cafe where they once spent hours laughing together during the beginning of their relationship. Now the atmosphere felt completely different. Heavy. Awkward. Like two people standing inside the ruins of something they once believed would last forever. When he walked in, her heart immediately tightened. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. His smile looked weaker now. His eyes carried constant tiredness. And for the first time, she truly saw what months of emotional stress had done to him. "You look tired," she whispered softly after he sat down. A faint smile crossed his face. "I am." No bitterness. No blame. Just honesty. And somehow, that honesty hurt more than anger. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then finally, she gathered enough courage to ask, "Were things really that bad for you?" He stared quietly at the coffee cup in his hands before answering. Every day felt emotionally unpredictable. Her chest tightened instantly. "What do you mean?" He sighed softly. "I never knew when I'd feel close to you. and when I'd suddenly feel emotionally shut out. The words hit painfully hard, because deep down, she understood exactly what he meant. There were nights I stayed awake wondering why another man's attention mattered so much around us, he admitted quietly. Her eyes immediately filled with tears again. And after a while, I started feeling stupid for even caring. The sadness in his voice shattered her completely, because nobody who genuinely loves someone should feel ashamed for wanting emotional reassurance. I never wanted you to feel that way, she whispered brokenly. I know. Again, that same painful answer. He believed her intentions weren't evil, but intentions didn't erase emotional damage. He leaned back slightly and rubbed his tired eyes. You know what scared me most? He asked softly. She shook her head slowly. I started losing confidence in myself. The confession stunned her completely, because she had never imagined the situation affected him that deeply. I became anxious over things that never used to bother me, he continued quietly. I overthought everything. He swallowed hard before looking at her again. And eventually, I stopped recognizing myself. Tears rolled down her face silently now, because suddenly, she realized this relationship hadn't only hurt his feelings. It had changed him emotionally. I hate that I did this to you, she whispered. He looked at her gently. You didn't do it alone. That surprised her instantly. You kept hurting me without realizing it, he explained softly. But I stayed too long hoping things would magically feel okay again. The cafe fell silent after that. Rain tapped softly against the windows outside while both of them sat there surrounded by painful truths. Then, finally, he looked directly into her eyes and quietly admitted the one thing she feared most. I still love you. Her heart immediately tightened with fragile hope, until he softly finished the sentence. But I don't know if I can survive feeling that way again. And in that moment, she finally understood how close love and emotional exhaustion can become when pain stays ignored for too long. The cafe suddenly felt too quiet after his words. I still love you, but I don't know if I can survive feeling that way again. She stared at him in silence while her chest tightened painfully, because for the first time, she truly understood how deeply the relationship had damaged him emotionally. Not through betrayal, not through lies, but through repeated emotional neglect that slowly convinced him his feelings didn't matter. Outside, rain continued falling softly against the windows. Inside, everything between them felt fragile, like one final conversation stood between saving the relationship or losing it forever. I don't want this to end, she whispered emotionally. He lowered his eyes for a moment before answering. I didn't want it to become this either. The sadness in his voice nearly broke her again, because even now, he wasn't speaking with hatred, only exhaustion. She reached across the table slowly, her trembling fingers touching his hand carefully. For a brief second, he didn't pull away, and that tiny moment gave her hope. I know I realized everything too late, she whispered through tears, but I understand now. He stayed silent. I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all those months. Still silence. Then finally, he looked at her gently. The painful part is. He paused briefly. I needed you to understand while I was still emotionally fighting for us. The words shattered her instantly, because once again, he was right. There was a time when reassurance from her could have healed him instantly, a time when choosing emotional boundaries would have made him feel safe again. But now, too much damage had already settled inside him, and trust doesn't return overnight after emotional exhaustion takes over. I can change, she whispered desperately. I know you can, he replied softly. That answer confused her again. Then why does it feel like you're saying goodbye to me? For several long seconds, he said nothing. Then finally, he admitted the truth she feared most. Because part of me already started grieving this relationship a long time ago. Her breathing became uneven immediately, because those words carried something terrifying inside them. Acceptance. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably now. I hate myself for hurting you like this. He shook his head gently. Don't hate yourself. The kindness in his voice somehow made everything worse, because even after everything, he still cared about protecting her feelings. You know what I kept hoping for? He asked quietly. She looked at him through blurred tears. I hoped one day you'd notice my pain without me having to beg you to see it. The sentence completely destroyed her. Because that was the real tragedy. He never wanted perfection. He never demanded control. He simply wanted emotional consideration from the person he loved most. And she noticed too late. Silence settled between them again while the cafe slowly emptied around them. Then finally, he looked at the clock and stood up slowly. Her heart instantly panicked. You're leaving. He nodded slightly. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them ready for what this moment meant. Then suddenly, she stood up too and wrapped her arms around him tightly, as if holding him hard enough could stop the relationship from slipping away completely. For several seconds, he hugged her back silently. And somehow, that made her cry even harder. Because the hug didn't feel like reassurance anymore. It felt like goodbye. When they finally pulled apart, his eyes looked just as emotional as hers. But behind that emotion, there was also peace. The kind of peace people find after finally accepting something painful. And as he quietly walked toward the cafe exit, one devastating realization settled inside her heart completely. Sometimes people don't leave because they stopped loving you. Sometimes they leave because loving you started hurting them more than losing you ever could. Weeks passed after that night at the cafe. And somehow, the silence between them became the final answer neither of them wanted to accept. They still texted occasionally. Short conversations. Birthdays. Work updates. Small pieces of connection carefully surviving between two people who once shared everything. But the relationship itself? It never fully returned. Because some emotional wounds heal slowly. And some change people permanently. At first, she kept hoping time would bring him back emotionally. That eventually he would miss her enough to try again. Because he had always been the one who fought harder. The one who stayed longer. The one who loved more loudly. But now, he no longer sounded like someone waiting to be chosen. And that reality terrified her. One evening, months later, she accidentally saw him again downtown. He was standing outside a bookstore holding coffee in one hand while talking to his brother. For a moment, her heart reacted instantly the way it always used to. But something about him looked different now. Calmer. Lighter. Like someone who had finally escaped constant emotional confusion. And suddenly, she realized how exhausted he truly looked during the last year of their relationship. Back then she was too distracted defending herself to notice it. Now it was painfully obvious. He noticed her standing there and gave a small surprised smile. Not awkward. Not angry. Just gentle. That somehow hurt most of all. Because the bitterness between them had disappeared. Only sadness remained now. Hey, he said softly. Hey. For a moment, neither of them knew what to say. Then finally, she asked quietly, Are you happier now? He looked down at his coffee cup thoughtfully before answering. I'm more peaceful. The honesty in his voice nearly broke her again. Because deep down, she knew peace was exactly what he had been searching for during the final months they were together. She smiled sadly while fighting tears. I wish I understood all this earlier. He looked at her gently. I know. Again, that same heartbreaking answer. Not cruel. Not angry. Just truthful. They walked together quietly for a few minutes through the city streets. Like two strangers carrying memories only they understood. Then suddenly, she stopped walking. There's something I never said properly, she whispered. He turned toward her calmly. Tears slowly filled her eyes again. I'm sorry you had to beg for emotional reassurance from someone who loved you. The silence after that felt incredibly heavy. Because those words finally acknowledged the pain he carried for so long. For several seconds, he simply looked at her. Then softly replied, Thank you. No dramatic speech. No emotional reunion. Just two people finally understanding each other too late. A cold evening wind moved softly through the street around them. And for the first time since their breakup, she realized something painful but important. Love alone isn't always enough. Relationships also need emotional safety, consideration, reassurance. And once someone spends too long feeling emotionally alone, even deep love can slowly turn into exhaustion. Eventually, they reached the corner where their paths separated. He glanced at her one last time. And despite everything, his eyes still carried warmth, but not the kind that asks someone to stay. The kind that quietly lets them go. "Take care of yourself," he said softly. She nodded while tears blurred her vision again. "You too." Then he turned and walked away slowly into the crowded city lights. This time, he didn't look back. And standing there alone, watching the man she once thought would never leave disappear into the distance, she finally understood the painful truth she would carry forever. The saddest relationships aren't destroyed by lack of love. They're destroyed when someone feels emotionally unseen for too long.